Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon members. Thank you to the people that have joined the channel. Thank you to everybody that's commented on the videos, shared the videos, liked the videos, subscribed to the channel. It all helps the algorithm, and that gets our voice heard on a bigger level. So continue to do that, share the videos and whatnot. Links are in the description if anybody's interested in the Patreon or anything like that. And I'm going to do a moment of silence for the person still struggling with intrusive thoughts or addiction or anything like that. So on the count of three, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you for that. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went and what years.
My name is Tim Green. I went to Turnabout Ranch in 1992 and 1993. And then another place, eaglemountboyshome in Sandpoint, Idaho in 94.
Okay. And walk us through your childhood and what led up to you being sent away.
That's one of the first things I can remember being very traumatic was I was very close to my grandfather. I felt a very pure type of love from him that I've yet to find later in life. But I was a 6-year-old kid. It was a summer, and he was over at the house helping my mother put together some bunk beds for my sister and I. And I walked in the room. It was 1984, and he and I agreed to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark together. And then I ran outside and played like any 6-year-old would. And just a few moments later, the police and ambulance are in front of the house, and I walk in through the back, and there's Grandpa on the living room floor, and they're trying to bring him back to life. And I remember being on a hillside shortly after, just minutes after it took place. I was standing there with a childhood friend, Mikey, and I remember Mikey telling me, don't worry, your grandfather's not dead. God wouldn't do that. And and of course I knew otherwise. And I remember that being the first moment of, that was the first time that I had questioned, whether or not there was a God, and if there was one, was he really looking out for us? It was that moment that I lost my innocence, I guess, way to put it. A few years later, my parents divorced. I'm mass divorce, and my mother didn't handle it very well. She went from being a very domestic housewife sort of woman, the kind of woman who threw Tupperware parties, to all of a sudden having a full-blown cocaine addiction. And the house changed overnight, and all of a sudden there were weird people hanging around, and parties and fights breaking out, and the police showing up, and windows getting broken, and mom's sleeping or partying all the time. And it's 1989. I'm living in a small town, and I have no supervision. All of a sudden I'm, whatever. And I took full advantage of it. I much older than I was. I started going to parties and experimenting with drugs and alcohol. I started having sex with much older girls. I was running around with a bad crowd. Didn't have any interest at all in school. And my parents too. A couple years later, my dad stepped in and took full custody of my sister and I. And I went from having no rules to all of a sudden, I'm expected to toe the line and do well in school and obey authority. And I revolted. And, it got to the point where I just wasn't doing anything my parents wanted me to do. I was constantly getting thrown out of school, drinking and doing dope anytime I could. And I went away to my first treatment center at 12 years old, and that didn't really work. I mean, I didn't. All I really learned at my first treatment center was that there was all kinds of other drugs out there that sounded a lot better that I hadn't done yet, and that was pretty much that experience. My parents were up in arms, and finally, my dad's company that he worked for, the assistance program, pointed him in the direction of the troubled teen industry. For some reason at the time, back in the late 80s and early 90s, the troubled teen industry had Washington pinpointed. A lot of kids from Washington were going to those places.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure why. Maybe Washington was one of their more focused. But yeah, this is back before anybody had heard about any of it.
Okay. Is that all that led up to being sent there?
I was thinking about what really led up to me being sent there right before this call happened, and essentially what I was doing was smoking marijuana, and I wasn't that interested in school, and I was thinking that in today's society, that would have been looked at much differently than it was back then. I come from a generation where kids were supposed to go from A to directly B like a bullet, and if there were with any variance in between on the path, if they have any trouble at all, it wasn't looked at favorably. I think today they would have realized that A, the marijuana problem probably would have passed. It was just a curiosity. And that B, I didn't learn like a traditional student, and it would have been better to put me in a different kind of school. But, we didn't have any of those things back then. And my parents they didn't know what to do. And they took the advice of professionals who hadn't gone and checked out these places on their own. My parents are really good people. I don't want this interview to come off like I'm a victim and they're horrible. I may have made the same mistake they did. The real bad guy in this is the troubled teen industry, who came into a desperate situation and offered a pretty extreme way out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Were you transported, or did your parents bring you up there?
The first time I went willingly. I drove with my father and a friend of his to the airport, and because I knew in the back of my mind that I was different than most kids. I could see that I had some definite behavior problems going on, and I knew that I was using drugs and alcohol a lot more than my peers. Something was wrong with me. So I went along with it, and of course it turned out to be nothing like the brochure had explained. Went through 3 months, pretty much passed with flying colors, came home, and within a few weeks was hanging out with old friends again, doing the same stuff. And they sent me again. This time they knew that I wasn't going to go without a fight. And so the second time, I was woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning by a very large man and a very large woman who put me in handcuffs and drove me 3 hours to the airport, took me through the airport in handcuffs, which was humiliating and unnecessary. It was, pretty dramatic and traumatic.
Okay. And what do you remember about when you first got to Turnabout Ranch?
Wow, that was quite a night. I got picked up at the airport by, some random ranch hand that worked there, and he talked the place up and made it sound like it was going to be a great experience. And then as soon as I get out of the car, we're out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. I'm physically removed from the car and physically placed inside a 10-foot circle of rocks and told that I'm not allowed to speak until otherwise notified. I'm not given a blanket or a pillow. I have to sleep outside. I was given a big bag of rice and lentils, and I was told that if I wanted to eat, I had to carve my own bowl and my own spoon, and I had to learn how to make a fire without any matches, of which they provided some vague instructions on how to go about doing that. And it took several days before I was successfully able to start a fire and actually eat some food. It was a couple of weeks before I was actually able to talk or take a shower or do any of the things that most normal human beings do when they first wake up.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you end up, because I'm curious, how did you end up striking the fire, and how did you end up carving your bowl and whatnot?
They pointed us in the direction of where to find pieces of wood for our utensils, and they gave us a carving knife, and they also gave us a pamphlet on how to do a bow drill, and had to go and break off some sage wood and basically make a bow out of it, and then use the bow to it's hard to explain. It's called a bow drill if you want to look it up on Google.
Where you go like this?
That's the way of doing it by hand. There's a more efficient way of doing it where you kind of create half of a bow and arrow, intertwine a piece of wood into that thing, and then
create friction.
Yeah, it friction, yeah. And you have to make sure that the ember falls in a little bird's nest that you've made.
Yeah.
And catches fire. Yeah, I guess that would come in handy if I were on some survival show or something, but I'm not exactly sure what I was supposed to learn from that, other than the 4-H program at Turnabout, where they give each student their own horse and teach you all about how to take care of a horse and how to ride a horse. That was pretty valuable. That was a cool experience. Other than that, it was miserable, abusive, and authoritarian.
Okay. And how long were you there? You said 3 months?
Months each time, yeah. And then after Turnabout Ranch really not working 2 times in a row, my father decided it was time to send me somewhere where they not only would take care of me, but also provide some sort of schooling. Because Turnabout Ranch didn't have any school; they didn't have any education. I was missing out on all kinds of school. Not that I would have been going to school had I been home, but yeah, education was very important to my dad.
Okay. And how many people were there, if you could make an estimation, when you got to Turnabout Ranch, and how many people were there when you left?
I'd say there are around 30 or 40 kids, probably the same amount. I mean, they constantly have people coming in and out of there. There's always a good mix of newer kids with kids who are about to graduate. Yeah.
Okay. And I know there was females there. Were they on the same campus as you?
They were, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's changed yet or not. Most places you go, they separate the women from the men, but no, they did not do that at Turnabout. Slept in different areas, but that was about it.
Okay. And did they do the seminars at Turnabout?
Go inside. Are these bells too loud?
They're not that loud, but you can go inside if you want.
Okay. I'm listening.
Did they do the seminars at Turnabout?
If they did, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay, you would know what I was talking about if they did them. Did you have like small groups? Like, did you have any like attack therapy where you would be in like? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that's what you called them, but yeah, that was one of their favorite things to do, especially the the more petty staff who were not necessarily counselors, but just hourly employees who didn't have any sort of formal education on how to deal with teenagers or how to treat any of this stuff. They would put us all in groups and encourage us. Usually they would pull someone out, someone who had misbehaved recently, and they would encourage the whole group to just attack that person, attack every fiber of their being, and this would go on all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the seminars that we did, they were essentially those attack therapies, a bunch of them over like several day period. And then intertwined with those, there would be like certain processes that they would have us do. And it's really hard to explain, but essentially, like, just think about attack therapy for days, essentially. Okay.
Yeah, I was told that everything I felt and everything I thought was worthless. That was what they were trying to put into my brain, and it worked.
Was there points and levels at Turnabout?
There was levels 1 through 4.
Okay.
When you finally get level 4, you're sent out on a solo mission for several days. You're sent out to this cabin in the middle of nowhere and told, just survive and think about why you're here and what you've done.
That's crazy. What level did you get to?
I allowed them to. I realized shortly into my stay there that I was in real trouble. There was no getting out of this situation. These people meant business, and it didn't take long at all to change my behavior and start telling them exactly what they wanted to hear. Yeah, I had a few slip-ups from beginning to end, but for the most part, I was able to adapt and get out of there without a lot of the damage that some people get.
Okay. So did you get to level 4 then?
I
did. Okay. And how long did that take you? Did it take you the whole 3 months to get to level 4?
Just about, yeah. I think I reached level 4 with about 2 weeks to go. Okay.
And did you get a phone call to your parents? And if so, how long after you got there did you get your first phone call?
No, I don't remember getting any sort of phone call to my parents. I was allowed letters to them, and they were allowed to write me. The staff would read my letters, of course, before sending them out. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that's legal, but that's what they do. No phone calls, but my dad did come for like a halftime visit, like at the 45-day mark. And while he was there, I remember them. I didn't think much of it at the time, but they sure kept him away from, showing him the early parts of my experience at the ranch.
Of course.
They were what he saw and who he. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And so that was a planned visit then, I assume? It wasn't just, he didn't just show up there, right? It was planned, right?
Yeah, probably from the beginning.
Yeah, I would assume so. Did you guys work the kitchen? Or did...
We worked everything. Turnabout Ranch, it's a pretty ingenious business plan. Basically, they're charging parents thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to have these kids come in and completely renovate and build all of this property they've built, and they're making millions and millions of dollars doing it. Free labor.
Yep, exactly. That's what I was going to say, is free labor, free child labor,
Yeah, and some of it had a point, some of it didn't. Sometimes they would just say, here's a shovel, dig a 6-foot hole, and when you're done, fill it back up.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We'd do that in whatever kind of weather conditions it was, whether it was 106 out or in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yep, didn't matter.
No.
What was the youngest person that you knew was there when you were there?
I was one of the youngest the first time, 11 or 12.
Okay, wow. Okay. How was the food? Horrible, bearable, good? Some of it good, some of it bad.
It was horrible in the beginning. As you advance through the levels, the food gets better.
Okay. Were you on any prescription medications before you got sent there? And if you were, did they take you off of them, or did they keep you on them when you were there?
This was a long time ago. I'm sure that, I was on some medication of some sort. I don't remember. Diagnosed with all kinds of different things misdiagnosed as a kid. I was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder, which
So was I.
Yeah, and I can see that being a good fit. I've carried that with me most of my life. There's not a medication for that. I was probably taking lithium or whatever the bipolar drug of the era was. Okay. I certainly didn't get any medication at Turnabout.
Okay. Did you ever witness anybody or hear about any sexual abuse by the staff or student on student, or any physical abuse?
Yeah, I saw all kinds of that. I don't know how deep you want me to go into that.
Just whatever you want to share.
One of the more brutal things I saw was after a couple kids tried to escape. They after several hours of a pretty intense search, they called in a helicopter. That's how much money these places have. They called in a helicopter and were able to find these two boys, and then afterwards made them, they took their shoes away from them, tied them to horses, and made them walk around in the Utah desert for 3 or 4 days with very little food or water, and barefoot. Those boys came back looking like they were on their last leg.
Wow. Okay.
And as far as I never saw any highly explosive sexual abuse, but yeah, there were older men that worked at Turnabout Ranch, or probably work at Turnabout Ranch, that make necessary comments and gestures towards the females all the time.
Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, from either of these schools, did you hear about or know about anybody going missing, or just running and never being found, or anything like that?
No, I don't think anybody has successfully escaped from Turnabout, not for very long anyway. I know finally killing a staff member there, and he's in prison for the rest of his life.
Were you there when that happened?
Oh, that was much later. That was around the time that Dr. Phil got involved in all this and started promoting those kinds of places, and Turnabout was one of them. I think the backlash on all this really started when that happened.
Yeah. Yep.
What places did you go to? What's your experience?
I went to Spring Creek Collegiate Academy in Thompson Falls, Montana for 22 months.
22 months. Wow.
Yeah, I fought and rebelled for the first year, and then they finally broke me. They always do.
Yeah, they do.
But,
most of the places I was sent early on were places that were 30 to 90 days. It wasn't until after Turnabout failed that I was finally sent to the kind of place you're talking about, that was it was an indefinite amount of time.
Yeah. So many things outside of your control. Like if somebody just doesn't like you, they'll just consequence you because they don't want to see you advance. Like there's so many stuff behind the scenes that makes it hard and to show that it's not just you decide when you go home. It's we decide when you go home. You know what I mean?
And it's a lot of the staff members that they have are not above making things personal, and
totally, all the time.
Liking a kid and making it difficult for him on purpose, or her.
Yep. Yeah. So I was there. I was there 22 months. I was there 22 months to answer your question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long stretch of time. The guy who runs Turnabout now, he goes by the name of Myron. And he was just a ranch hand when I was there. He had just started as just an hourly fee. And he was one of the more memorable people from that whole experience. He was one of the people that was very violent and very abusive, especially towards the animals.
That's fucked up.
Yeah, I saw many dogs and horses get whipped horribly from this guy who's now in charge of everything down there. They've got a sociopath running the works.
Yeah, it's unfucking believable. So you graduated from Turnabout then?
Well, the first time I did. The second time, Turnabout just threw up their hands, and they didn't know what to do with me either. And that's when I was sent off to a place in Idaho that was going to keep me indefinitely.
Okay, wait, I'm a little bit confused. So you graduated from Turnabout and then you went back to Turnabout?
Correct, yeah. I went times.
Okay.
The first time I did what I was told and played the game and got through the whole ordeal. And the second time I went back and I wasn't playing their game a second time.
Yeah. Did they have any solitary confinement there? Turnabout?
Not that you got locked in, like literally physically locked in, but it certainly wasn't odd for you to go and have to spend days or weeks of time in isolation where you're not allowed any contact or communication with anyone.
Yeah. Okay. So the second time you were there, what was the hardest? Well, overall, actually, what was the hardest part about being at Turnabout Ranch for you? Sorry.
Well, back then my friends were really important to me. I was at Turnabout Ranch, and I was missing out on having a childhood, and I knew it. That was the most difficult part of it. Also, the iron fist at which they come at you with these rules and regulations and how they go about breaking you. It's a humiliating and humbling experience.
Definitely. Okay. So how did you get from I'm just curious with the transportation from Turnabout to the place in Idaho, how did that happen? Did you know you were going to another program, or did they just
and I tried to escape.
Okay.
Turnabout put me on a plane in Salt Lake City, Utah. And my dad had arranged for someone to escort me, but for some reason Turnabout dropped the ball on that, and they just put me on a plane by myself. And so when I landed in Spokane, Washington, I just walked right out of the airport.
Nice.
I called my dad and told him I had missed my plane, and when he asked, okay, when's your next plane coming? I gave him the wrong time and the wrong, gate and everything. And that whole thing ended with me running around out in a huge field next to the Spokane airport when the cops finally had me in handcuffs again, and they got me.
Okay. What do you remember about when you first got to the place in Idaho?
I remember thinking that compared to Turnabout, it was a really half-assed organization. I happened to show up there at a time, I think, when they were having a lot of financial problems.
Probably.
So they had to fire all of their decent staff. And the next thing you know, they're just hiring the first asshole that walks in off the street looking for a job. And the kids, I being amongst them, we basically took that place over. We were doing anything we wanted to. If any other kids stepped out of line, they got physically abused by us, by the other kids. We had, staff.
Go.
We had staff.
Hold on, I can't see. You're like frozen.
What's the last thing
Hello?
you heard?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
To restart. Hold on, I'm going to
Hello?
call you back. Go for it.
So yeah, I showed up at this place at a time when they were running out of money, and they had to get rid of any decent staff that they had that were educated in how to treat any of this stuff. And they went to hiring, the first person that would show up at the door. And as a result, the kids took over the place. We started doing whatever we wanted. We vandalized and destroyed the place, and we took over. And any other kids that got out of line were abused by other kids there physically. And we had staff bringing in drugs for us, and it turned into quite an experience, and in a much different Turnabout had been.
Oh, there we go. Back. Okay. I can hear you again. Okay, so you essentially took it over and you were vandalizing stuff.
Yeah, and had staff bringing in drugs, and having girls over in the middle of the night, and sneaking out, and yeah, it was a mess.
Okay. Was there points and levels there?
Not really, no. No.
So they just decided when you went home?
I'm not sure who decided that. I ultimately never. I stayed in Idaho for what ended up being a few years. That place went out of business. I don't know how long. Maybe a year and a half of kids, ruling the roost and taking it over. That place finally shut down. And there was a guy that throughout that time had been coming up to the school and bringing AA and 12-step groups to these kids. And he took a particular interest in a couple of us, and I was one of them. And he was trying to open up one of these clean and sober houses, which at the time, nobody had heard of, or they were just starting. And so I went directly from this place in Idaho to a clean and sober house for kids. Essentially, my parents were trying to figure out any way they could to pay strangers to take care of me. They just didn't put me around.
Yeah. No, that was the case for a lot of kids. It's really unfortunate. So you were there a couple years. Was the food horrible there? Was it decent?
I don't really recall. So it couldn't have been that bad.
Okay. What was the worst thing about being there for you? What was the hardest thing for you?
Probably the same thing as Turnabout. Just the emotional toll of knowing that that something is wrong with you. You can't fix it. Nobody can fix it, and because of that, you're missing out on all these things that normal kids are doing. There are my parents up at their house. They they have photo albums of them and my sister going on vacations and cruises and visiting other countries and doing all these cool things. And I'm nowhere in any of those pictures. I'm nowhere to be found. I missed out on all kinds of stuff.
Okay. Did you witness anybody, any sexual abuse or any physical abuse?
Yeah, there was always some of that to some degree or another. Okay. I don't know how valuable it is to discuss that ad nauseum.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, the only reason I asked that is because when people do know that stuff happening, I like to get it on recording, so I have like, this person said this, you know what I mean? So when I'm talking about certain schools, I can be like, yeah, these things happen so many times because of the interviews. That's the only reason I ask. But okay. When you came home, you went to a clean and sober place after that. How long were you there? How long until you actually got back home or to your hometown?
I didn't go back to my hometown. I was probably 15 or 16, and that's when I made my. This story has come up a lot recently. I made my first real attempt at getting sober and trying to show some sort of interest in school. And I managed to make it a year and a half. I stayed sober for a year and a half, and I got involved in school again. I was getting decent grades. I started playing guitar. I was in the high school talent show. I was finally doing things that a normal teenage kid should do. I got a date with a real pretty girl to go to a prom, which I had never been to before, and that was pretty exciting. And about 5 minutes before my father and I were about to walk out the door to go rent my tuxedo, this girl had her friend call me and let me know that she had gotten together with some old boyfriend of hers, and she was going to have to cancel the prom.
Unbelievable.
So the next day, I got in a fight at school. I got suspended. I went to a doctor and explained everything that was going on, how stressed out I was, and he gave me Valium. I was this 15-year-old kid. My parents weren't there. He didn't ask their permission or anything, and he gave me Valium. It was a different time in this country. And 3 days later, I was drinking again. 3 days later, I was doing dope again, and I didn't make a serious effort towards getting sober again until I was in my early 30s.
Okay. Go ahead.
Needless to say, I didn't graduate from high school. In 1997, I went and sat down and took a GED test and passed it. My first try. I was always a smart kid. That wasn't, my intelligence had nothing to do with why I was failing in school. I just didn't have any interest in it. I didn't have any interest in any of the things they were teaching. But yeah, then I got into some pretty hard drugs around 16 or 17 years old, and around 20, after having a brief relationship with a woman and having a son, who I'm still very close to this day. But yeah, around 20 years old, I graduated to living on the streets full time, and I was literally living under bridges and begging for spare change on street corners and hanging out with some of the most interesting people you've ever met, to say the least. And that was my existence. My existence was walking up and down the streets looking for crack cocaine and heroin. That's all I could do.
How long did you do that, and what got you sober?
I did that for years and years and years. When I was around 30 years old, and, just had absolutely nothing left. And I had every reason in the world to be sober. I had a family that loved me. I had a teenage son. I had all kinds of potential that I was wasting, and I knew it. But none of that was enough to get or keep me sober. I'm not one of those people that quit using. I hear a lot of people say that they quit doing drugs or they quit drinking alcohol, and I was never able to do that. I don't know what those people are talking about. I did not quit. In fact, I was living at a homeless shelter in Bellingham, Washington, and I had just gone through a breakup with one of the loves of my life, and I had a couple of weeks of white knuckle sobriety, and just hating every second of it. And I don't know if you know anything about homeless shelters or not, but basically they, most of them throw you out at 6 a.m, and you're not allowed to come back until much later in the afternoon. And, like most of the guys there, I would just kind of walk around all day aimlessly with nowhere to go and nothing to do. And I was walking around, reflecting on my life and thinking about her and thinking about how much I hated sobriety. And all of a sudden I knew I was going to use again. I didn't want to use, I didn't want to drink, but I knew I was going to. And I'd felt that way 100 times before. And I knew what was coming. And I was on my way to the liquor store. And for some reason, stopped in a phone booth. I don't know if you remember those, but I stopped in a phone booth and I tried calling someone that I knew from AA. And they didn't answer the phone.
Of course.
And I remember being in this phone booth, and for the first time in years, since that moment I talked about early on when my grandfather died, for the first years, I found myself reaching out to something beyond me. And I remember saying the words, God, if you're out there, please save me from myself. And I'd never heard that before. I don't know where that came from. It's almost like it came to me. And I walked down to the phone booth and I looked to the left and I see this other guy that was also staying at the Mission, and he's got all of his stuff with him, and he looks like he's having a pretty shitty day. So I go over there and talk to him, and it turns out he's been thrown out of the Mission and he has nowhere to go. I mean, he doesn't know what he's going to do. I said, well, I'm thinking about going to an AA meeting up the street. If you want to come with me and hang out, maybe we can figure something out. And we go to the meeting. We're the first people there. We're standing talking, and this guy shows up. He's the first one to pull into the meeting. And I didn't know anything about this guy other than I knew he lived at some sort of clean and sober house. And I approached him. I said, hey, my buddy here, he doesn't have a place to stay tonight. Is there anything you can do to help him out? And I was able to get this guy a couch to stay on for the night. But the significance of this story is it was in that moment that the urge to drink or do drugs went away, and for some reason it didn't come back. And I'm not some born again Bible thumping addict. That, in fact, I'm not even sure I believe in God. But something happened on a spiritual level that day. It was, I went from being obsessed with alcohol and drugs, willing to do anything to get more of them, to all of a sudden the impulse and the desire was just completely removed from me.
That's very interesting. Okay. I did meth and heroin for like 10 years. I have 3.5 years off of meth and heroin. I'm on methadone right now. I'm working on tapering off of that. And I smoke weed, but that's it. I still consider myself sober, though. So I feel like sober is by your definition of what sober is. That's the way I look at it. You know what I mean?
Well, I made it 5 years doing the AA thing, religiously. And at the end of that, I've been involved in a 12-step program off and on my entire life since I was 12 years old. And I finally just kind of got tired of all the drama that goes on within the fellowship, and the dogma of AA.
Yeah.
And I reached a point where my depression was so bad that the working the steps and trying to live a spiritual life was no longer good enough. That wasn't working in and of itself. So I started smoking marijuana too, and quite frankly, it saved my life. I don't apologize to anybody for it.
I completely agree. And one thing that always bothered me about, well, there's several things about AA and whatnot. And if it works for you, and I know I have to say this, if it works for you, just whatever works for you, that's totally fine. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience in that I personally feel it's hypocritical to smoke cigarettes and have coffee there, which are both, addictions, right? But then criticize me for smoking weed.
Yeah, well, the reason I walked away from AA is because, number one, the drama of the fellowship, and I wasn't innocent in that. I contributed that just as much as anybody else did. But, basically their message is, you can't get sober unless you have some sort of spiritual awakening. Yeah. And if you don't have that spiritual awakening, then apparently God doesn't find you worthy of having this gift that the rest of us do. And I just, once that thought crossed my mind, I couldn't find a loophole in my mind to forgive that.
I totally feel that. Okay. If you could go back in a time machine, knowing what you know now, would you still go through Turnabout Ranch and the place in Idaho?
I think so. I mean, one of my favorite artists is Ozzy Osbourne. He says in Road to Nowhere, through all the happiness and sorrow, I guess I'd do it all again.
Okay.
That. There are a few things along the way that if they had gone differently, who knows? If my parents had treated my fascination with marijuana as the phase that it probably was, and hadn't hit the panic button, who knows what may have happened. There was also a turning point in my life where, I come from a small town in Washington where high school football used to be really big, and I couldn't wait until I was a teenager so that I could go play football for our high school. And when I started high school, I immediately went out for the football team, and I got my uniform and was ready to play. And I would have committed myself to that sport, and I think I could have turned my life around and made a much different road for myself. But rather than let me playing football, my parents decided that sending me to Turnabout Ranch was the best way to go. I wonder what would have happened had a different decision been made.
Yeah, I feel that. What do you think would have helped you instead of being sent away?
That's a good question. Given the resources that we had at the time in the late 80s and early 90s, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what would have helped me. I know what has always helped me, in the past, and that's been having a sense of community. But like I said, I'm from a small town. It's not like there were lots of other parents and lots of other kids having the same issues I was having. My parents didn't have a support network to reach out to, and neither did I at that age. Yeah. And I guess the alternative could have been that my parents medicated me like what is happening today.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that would have been any better.
Yeah. Who knows? Have you tried talking to your parents about how these places affected you? And how is your relationship with your parents?
My relationship with my parents now is really good, and yeah, we're able to discuss most of these things without a blow up happening. In their mind, I think, they think it should be much further in my past than it really is. To me, those things just happened yesterday, as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly.
So I haven't separated myself from it as much as they think I should.
Okay. And is there anything else you want people to know about your experience, or anything that you might tell a parent thinking about sending their kid to a place like this?
Well, I wouldn't recommend sending a child to any of these places under any circumstances. Can you repeat the question?
So anything you want to add to your story, or anything that you might tell a parent thinking about sending their kid to a place away like this?
Anything I'd like to add to my story? Well, I guess I'd like to talk a little about what's happening with. Sorry, somebody just walked in the door. Might want to cut this out. I recently had the pleasure of working with some of Paris Hilton's team, and I got to talk with Kathy Rogers, who's a congresswoman out of Spokane, Washington. I got to sit down with her and tell my, and we talked a little bit about that bill that Paris Hilton is trying to pass. And I think that everybody within that organization is they certainly aren't working with any, and they seem to be good people, well-intentioned people. I'm not sure if this bill they're trying to push through has the teeth that I want it to have. Seems to be, when I sat down with Paris Hilton's people and asked them particulars about the bill, they really struggled to give me an answer as far as what exactly the bill accomplishes. So I'm worried that SICA, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
I'm worried that SICA has kind of become this this girls' club where, a couple of people, it keeps a couple of people employed and it keeps Paris Hilton relevant. But why are we having to sit down and have conversations with Congress and men and women about whether or not places should exist that abuse and torture kids in America? Why are we having to have those discussions?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. There's a lot of people that share that sentiment in the community too. I don't want to speak for anybody else because they're not here, but I can tell you that you're not alone in that sentiment at all. I agree with it. I don't want to say too much because I have a podcast to uphold, but at the same time, I know what you're saying. I agree with the whole girls club thing. Well, I don't fully agree with it because I don't have like 100% factual evidence yet with it, but I understand what you're saying, and I can see how that can be.
They don't seem to have a dominant male voice in that group, and I don't know if that's on purpose or not, but
just might be a little bit counterproductive. Like also, like we're kind of getting into the weeds here a little bit, but like just like I feel like the word, like I haven't read all of it, but from what I've heard from other people, like it's just like you said, it's not enough teeth, like what would you want in a bill? Like what do you think would be better in the bill? Like if you,
Well, we need to put something together that forces accountability on these places.
Mhm.
Essentially, what they're trying to do is pass a bill that is exploratory, which is fine. I guess maybe that's a good start, but someone online made a really good point about how when you pass a bill in Congress that doesn't do much, later on when somebody does come around with a bill that could potentially make these places accountable and maybe even shut some of them down, it's going to give these congressmen an excuse to say, wait a minute, we already do something about this long ago?
Mm-hmm.
So that worries me.
Yeah, that it might get swept under the rug and that this might not make as much progress as we may want it to make, I totally agree with that. And at the end of the day, I just want to say that, like, at the end of the day, it's really about these children. It's about speaking for people that don't have a voice, that aren't able to speak of themselves right now. Really, the bigger picture is about that. And so, like, we want all we want is a bill to address those things, you know what I mean, and protect these children and hold these people accountable that are abusing children.
Exactly.
Like it's pretty straightforward, but I feel like we're kind of getting lost in the weeds, like just as like in general, where we should be addressing those two things head on, in my opinion, like protect the children, hold the people accountable that are abusing children, like, and also, like get these places, like either regulated fully or shut them down. Just shut them down. Like, I don't have any full, I don't believe that these places could be even fully regulated, because then what's going to happen if we have somebody that's corrupt? All it takes is one or two corrupt people to fuck some shit up. So, I don't know. It's
This whole thing is driven by billions of dollars, so of course there's going to be corruption in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people expect there not to be corruption. Yeah. It's a whole.
There's no reason and no excuse as to why Turnabout Ranch, one of the most notorious players in this whole game, is still open to this day.
Yeah, that among a bunch of other schools. I mean, we don't even have a full list of how many of these schools are operating currently. And that's just like in the United States. Like, we haven't even started to address these places in other countries. Like, this is going on like worldwide. You know what I mean? So this isn't just a United States problem. This is a world problem. And it needs to be addressed on all fronts.
And it's starting off on what I would assume is a very illegal premise in most cases, which is they're transporting kids over state lines.
Trafficking.
Yes.
Yep. By definition. Yep. Yep. And it's crazy. I think that there's a lot more involved in this. I'm kind of crazy in the head. Like, I do a lot of dot connecting, and I just know that there's so much, like, everything's connected. People think it's not, but everything's connected. And like when you really start taking the lid off of this, like, the amount of stuff that's connected is really insane and mind blowing. And so
it's interesting to me that this industry that has, hundreds of billions of dollars, they don't seem to be putting up much of a fight against Sicko, which says something in and of itself.
yeah, wouldn't I would think that they would be, somewhat like trying to, protect their interests or whatever the fuck, but I haven't really heard. Well, of course there's going to be people saying, oh, don't do it, whatever, but I haven't really seen people speaking out that much against it, which
Right.
I agree, why that should be examined for sure.
And I want to clarify this. I really didn't mean to speak ill of Paris Hilton earlier. She's the one that got this thing on the map and got this movement started. I think she's taken it in a great direction. But yeah, there's still more work to be done for sure. That's all I'm.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway is, like, we just don't want this to be just one nail in a coffin and then write everything else off after that. We want it to be all the nails in the coffin. You know what I mean? To completely just shut this down is my take, So.
And it shouldn't take hours and hours of debate to come to that conclusion.
No, it's really simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
If the Congress people had any idea what's actually happening at these places, I don't think it would be an issue at all.
Yeah. Well, see, and I don't want to get too far into it because I am kind of a conspiracy theorist or whatever the fuck people want to label me as. But they're part of it. The government's involved. So
I'm sure they are.
yeah. So
Mitt got a lot of money from this.
oh yeah. Yeah, no, he's not the only one either. There's been a lot of handouts politically through these places. It's crazy once you start looking under the hood of this thing.
Only in America.
Yeah. Yep. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to extend a invitation to you if you things come up, which they usually do for people when they do an interview for the first time or whatnot, or even after just not talking about it for a while. If stuff comes up and you want to do a part 2, take some notes and just reach out to me and we'll make a part 2 happen.
Okay.
And,
this is the first time I've been on a podcast, so I'm nervous and I'm sure there are a bunch of things I meant to say but didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, just take some notes and we'll do a part 2. And thanks for coming on the show. Thank you guys for watching so far in the video. Please make sure you like the video, share the video so we can get out there farther in the algorithm and spread more of this word, and subscribe if you're not already. We will catch you on the next one. Bye, y'all.
Have a good one.
Okay, so what happened after you got out of the program?
Well, I told you the story of me ultimately getting sober. In 2010, I decided to go back to school, and I got my college degree in computer information systems. It was quite a moment for me. It was the first time I got to invite my parents to a graduation of any kind other than me graduating from yet another rehab. So that was a pretty cool deal for me. But yeah, I got the degree in computer information systems and immediately got recruited by Microsoft, and I did computer work for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years until, I really just got bored with it. I found I didn't have any passion for that type of work, and I decided that I wanted to get involved in helping other people on a much more intimate level, and I got into social work, and I started doing that locally in the Spokane area, and then I developed kind of a savior complex and decided I wanted to go save the world, and I moved down to Los Angeles for a few years and became a social worker in South Central LA, which is one of the most notorious neighborhoods in the country. It was quite an experience.
Okay. What kind of social work?
Basically, I would help people who are experiencing homelessness and addiction and mental health problems. I help them navigate the system and get them into housing and get their basic needs taken care of as soon as possible.
Do you feel like you were able to do everything that you could to help them, or do you feel like that there was some things that you couldn't do to help that you probably should have been able to help? Like, was there like roadblocks?
The mental health industry is somewhat of a sham. You see all these places up that are supposedly out helping people with mental health and addiction problems, but really what they're all about is they want to bill Medicaid as much and as often as possible, and they spend most of their time demanding that their employees fill out paperwork so that they can bill insurance, rather than actually going out in the field and doing tangible things to make a difference in people's lives.
Go ahead.
It's another situation where it's unfortunately become all about the money.
Yeah. Do you would you have any contact with these people after you got them housed, or would that be the cutoff point? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you see a lot of people succeed, or did you see more people fail in that scenario?
It's kind of in the middle. Basically, the system is designed to keep people. It's designed to keep people dependent on it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only way I was ever able to escape being in the system was to kind of take a leap of faith and step out of it completely. And that's hard to do. That's really hard to do.
Definitely. Yeah, I can relate. What got you, what made you move back? Are you still doing social work? And if not, why not?
Well, LA was a really fun city until it wasn't.
Yeah.
There at the end, I can't get into it because there's some legal stuff going on, but I was assaulted by a 7-Eleven employee and came out of it with traumatic brain injury, and my life has been kind of turned upside down because of it.
Okay. Was this, you don't have to go into it if it's something you can't go into, but was this when you were trying to help somebody that this happened?
It was while I was in LA, and it was at the time. Yeah, I was a social worker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that. So that's why you moved back here to get away from LA?
It wasn't like in a really bad neighborhood or anything, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. No, I was more so trying to see if like you were no, you answered my question. So you moved back here, so you're not doing social work anymore?
No, I'd go to Spokane and drive for Grubhub every once in a while, but I'm having a lot of there have just been a lot of consequences since I got hit in the head.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Did it cause like permanent damage? Cause permanent damage?
I think so. Yeah, I'm no longer functioning like a normal everyday adult should be.
What does it affect the most? Like your memory or comprehension or
it feels like I aged 30 years overnight. It's affected my memory. Words are harder to enunciate. I've got a big problem with my right eye and my vision in general now. And I'm tired all of the time. All of the time.
Okay. Have they been able to do anything to help you, like the doctors or anything?
Really, we're kind of still in a fact finding stage of the medical stuff.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of doctors, but yeah, I should probably be careful about this.
Okay. Yeah. I don't want to impede on anything, so we'll just leave that there. All right. Is there anything else you want people to know about when you got out?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered it well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on once again.
No problem. Have a good day.
You too.